Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 4624, the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act of 2026 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4624, a bill to amend the Professional Boxing Safety Act of 1996 to establish requirements for unified boxing organizations to further enhance the well-being of professional boxers and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Wahlberg, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to insert extraneous material on H.R. 4624.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee in support of H.R. 4624, the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act of 2026. For much of the 20th century, boxing stood at the heart of American sports and culture. It gave us legends like Christy Martin, Joe Louis, Sugar Ray Robinson, Jack Dempsey, and Muhammad Ali. But the sport today looks very different. For too long, professional boxing has operated under an outdated patchwork of regulations that leaves fighters vulnerable to injury, exploitation, and limited opportunity. The Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act would bring the sport into the modern era. This bipartisan legislation would create new frameworks to enhance safety standards, expand opportunities for fighters, and restore integrity to the sport, revitalizing one of America's most iconic sports. This bipartisan bill would allow unified boxing organizations, UBOs, to operate alongside existing sanctioning bodies. That means more options for fighters and more choice in how they compete. For boxers fighting within UBOs, the bill would strengthen health and safety protections. The legislation also extends stronger safety protections and increases wages for all professional boxers, whether they compete inside or outside a UBO. In short, the bill gives boxers more choice, better pay, and stronger safety protections while encouraging the growth and modernization of this historic sport. Muhammad Ali, who was my constituent at one time, said this: "Don't count the days, make the days count." Today we have the opportunity to make this day count. For the fighters who step into the ring, for the future of this sport, for the integrity of the competition itself, and for the fans like me and others who will experience the benefit from this bill. For these reasons, I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 4624, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 4624, the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. This bill amends the federal law governing safety, transparency, and integrity in the professional boxing, the only professional sport that is federally regulated. The original law regulating boxing was enacted to end corrupt promoters' ability to corner the market by locking up top talent and requiring any would-be challengers to surrender their promotional rights or agree to new representation chosen by the promoter. Some particularly powerful promoters allegedly even threatened or bribed sanctioning organizations to manipulate their rankings. Thanks to current law, those days are over. As a result of that law, boxers at the top of the sport take home approximately 80% of the revenue associated with a match. The bill we're voting on today is a result of bipartisan work that went into improving it. Specifically, Chairman Wahlberg, Workforce Protection Subcommittee Ranking Member Omar, Representative Stevens, and I came together, identified key issues, and made meaningful fixes to strengthen the legislation. These changes were significant, and the bill we're considering is much better than the version that was introduced. For example, we improved health and safety protections for fighters, particularly when it comes to brain health, which is an important priority, by adding additional neurological testing. The bill now ensures that qualified ringside physicians are available, strengthens emergency preparedness by requiring on-site medical personnel, and expands pre-bout medical testing. We also enhanced boxers' economic security. We increased minimum insurance coverage for injuries and added accidental death coverage and raised the minimum compensation per round. We also took steps to protect the integrity of the sport. This bill now incorporates consistent anti-doping standards, increases drug testing, and it begins to address the problem of too many championship titles diluting competition. And we added protections for fighters under contract by limiting contract length, ensuring opportunities to compete or be compensated, and giving boxers a fair chance to pursue other opportunities. These practical, bipartisan improvements are a significant win for boxers' health and well-being, as well as their economic futures. As the bill moves forward in the legislative process, the Senate can and should build on the progress we've made in the House and continue to improve this legislation before it becomes law. For example, the Senate could ensure enforceability of the Boxing Act rights by prohibiting any contract between a boxer and a UBO or boxing service provider from including clauses that bar class action proceedings or mandate bringing disputes to private arbitration. Ask unanimous consent to enter into the record additional views accompanying the committee report on the bill.
Without objection.
Such views detail other areas where the bill could be strengthened. Meanwhile, I support the bill and thank the authors, Representative Sharice Davis of Kansas and Brian Jack of Georgia, for their work on this legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to yield 5 minutes to the author of this legislation, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Black.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of my bipartisan legislation, H.R. 4624, the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act, which I proudly authored and introduced with my colleague from Kansas, Representative Sharice Davis, a former professional mixed martial artist herself and a leader in her caucus. Mr. Speaker, I thank the chairman of the House Committee on Education and Workforce, Tim Wahlberg, the ranking member, Bobby Scott, and the distinguished members of the committee for considering and favorably reporting my legislation with an overwhelmingly bipartisan vote. Today, our House of Representatives has an opportunity to make history by passing the first federal boxing legislation in over a quarter century. Mr. Speaker, professional boxing in America has an incredibly rich and storied history. It's a sport that demands courage, perseverance, and determination from its champions, and its heroes have inspired greatness, ignited dreams, and forged generations of memories and tradition. 39 years before Jackie Robinson bravely broke barriers in Major League Baseball, Jack Johnson, the Galveston Giant, reigned as the first black heavyweight champion of the world from 1908 to 1915. Decades before the New York Knicks were formed, thousands of spectators crammed into Madison Square Garden to see Jack Dempsey fight. Many of you may recall storied bouts during boxing's golden era, like Leon Spinks versus Muhammad Ali in 1978, Marvin Hagler versus Thomas Hearns in 1985, and Mike Tyson versus Evander Holyfield in 1997. Unfortunately, American boxing has since faced a steady decline. 38 years have passed since an American won a heavyweight gold medal at the Olympics, and the majority of boxing's premier fights are now overseas, many time zones away. In recent years, HBO World Championship Boxing and Showtime Championship Boxing, long home to the greatest fights, ceased operations. Last year, ESPN's contract with a leading boxing promotion ended without renewal, leaving professional boxing without an American distributor. At the heart of boxing downturn is a structural flaw that our predecessors in Congress identified over 25 years ago but declined to address. We have the opportunity to fix this today and revive this great American sport. For over a century, individual states enacted legislation to regulate professional boxing, but the patchwork of regulations without uniform minimum standards led to the exploitation of boxers and rampant corruption. Since the 1950s, Congress has considered proposed legislation to address these problems, and after multiple attempts in the 1990s, Congress finally acted, passing the Professional Boxing Safety Act of 1996 and the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act in 2000. As a result, boxing is the only professional sport regulated by Congress. The Professional Boxing Safety Act of '96 established minimum safety standards for professional boxers. The Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act, more commonly known as the Ali Act, attempted to reform unfair and anti-competitive practices in the professional boxing industry. Both were enacted by voice vote with unanimous support from the House and Senate. Mr. Speaker, today we have the opportunity to follow in our predecessors' footsteps and pass the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. My legislation amends the Professional Boxing Safety Act of 1996 and preserves in its entirety the original Ali Act. First, my bill clarifies ambiguities in current law that have stifled innovation and investment in the sport. This legislation allows for the creation of unified boxing organizations, otherwise known as UBOs, that will provide professional boxers with more opportunities, better pay, and greater protections. The UBO system will not replace the current structure of the professional boxing. Instead, UBOs will operate as a separate parallel system that will give boxers the freedom to choose which system works best for them. The bill's strict anti-doping and anti-gambling protocols will safeguard the integrity of the sport and restrict UBOs from charging boxers fees for placement in rankings or participation in championship matches. To improve the safety and well-being of professional boxers, my legislation establishes a national minimum payment per round of $200 and strengthens existing health and safety protections, including establishing for the very first time a national minimum of $50,000 in health coverage for injuries sustained during a bout. My legislation also seeks to alleviate confusion fans often face while following the sport by specifying that sanctioning organizations and UBOs shall only award one championship title for each weight class. Mr. Speaker, the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act strengthens safety protections for boxers, improves the quality of life for boxers, and establishes a framework for innovation within the sport to flourish. Passage of my legislation will return boxing's events to our country, bringing jobs, investment, and economic activity back to American communities. The Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act is endorsed by Lonnie Ali, the wife of Muhammad Ali, the Association of Boxing Commissions, and former heavyweight champion of the world, Mike Tyson. Additionally, America's largest arena operators support my legislation, including Madison Square Garden Entertainment Corporation, MGM Resorts International, and State Farm Arena in my hometown of Atlanta. Representing American workers, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters also supports this legislation. Mr. Speaker, this legislation has accomplished something few other issues before this Congress have done. The Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act fostered collaboration between Republicans and Democrats who work together in good faith to revive one of America's greatest sports in the name of one of America's greatest athletes. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, the ranking member of the Workforce Protection Subcommittee, Ms. Omar.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. I come to this issue both as a legislator and a longtime fan of the sport. At its best, boxing is a sport of courage, discipline, and dignity. But for too long, the people who are risking the most have not always been treated with fairness and respect they deserve. Congress passed the original Ali Act for a reason: to stop powerful interests from exploiting boxers and denying them control over their careers. So when this bill first came before us, I had significant concerns. That is why I worked hard to make it better. We negotiated in good faith with the majority, and we did make it better. This bill now includes stronger baseline protections for boxers, including higher pay, better healthcare coverage, and a stronger ringside medical protections. It also includes an amendment that I offered with Representative Stevens to guarantee free agency for boxers, strengthening their economic freedom, and limiting the ability of powerful leagues to control boxers' careers. I'm voting yes today because boxers deserve those benefits and protections. But let me be clear, this work is not done. We still need stronger financial transparency, stronger anti-monopoly provisions, and stronger safeguards against coercive contracts, including forced arbitration clauses. I support this bill not because it is perfect, but because we fought hard to make sure it wasn't just a gift to industry. Boxers put their bodies, their long-term health, and their livelihoods on the line every time they step into the ring. Congress should not ask them to accept more risk with less protection and less economic security. I urge senators to keep improving this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it's a privilege to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and a doggone good wrestler in his time as NCAA champion, Mr. Jordan.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the chairman for yielding and thank him for his work on this bill. You know, as a kid growing up in the 70s and 80s who was into sports, you loved watching boxing. Title fights were a big thing. I mean, it was like comparable to the Final Four, to the World Series. Big fights you turned into, and some of these names have been mentioned. Thomas Hitman Hearns, I remember from Detroit, Marvelous Marvin Hagler. And of course, I loved the Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran fights that took place, especially when Sugar Ray beat him the second time, the No Mas fight. But nothing compared to the heavyweight title fights. Ali Frazier, Frazier Foreman, Ali Foreman, Ali Norton, Frazier, all those guys, amazing fights. And so I want to thank the chairman again for the work on this bill, but I particularly want to thank Representative Jack for the good work he has done, hoping that we can revive boxing in this great sport in our country and do it in a way that will expand opportunity for young fighters who want to box and want to be in this game, and do it in a way that's also healthy for them, healthy for the sport, healthy for everyone. And that's what this legislation does. So again, thank you to the chairman, thank you to the committee, the bipartisan work that was done, but in particular, I want to thank Representative Jack for the good work he has done shepherding this bill through, and I urge a yes vote.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Connecticut, senior member of the Committee on Education and Workforce, Mr. Courtney.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in opposition to H.R. 4624, which I also opposed in committee along with 3 other members, to the Muhammad Ali Boxing Revival Act, a bill which radically amends the existing Muhammad Ali Act that was passed in 2000. That law established statutory protections for boxers from exploitative and unethical business practices. The committee received expert testimony from witnesses with deep experience in the legal landscape in the boxing world and warned us that this bill will strip away many of those hard-fought reforms. H.R. 4624 creates a new parallel legal structure, the so-called Unified Boxing Organizations, which can engage in promotion, rule-setting, match organization, and creation of their own titles and rankings. Under the existing law, negotiated and spearheaded by the late John McCain, these functions have been required to remain separate to protect against conflicts of interest and coercive contract terms for boxers. The UBO organizations proposed under H.R. 4624 will replicate a model that has been extremely lucrative in other non-boxing mixed martial arts sports worlds that operate with few legal and economic protections for fighters, leading to a long history of litigation and allegations of coercive and anti-competitive practices. This includes the use of long-term contracts, including forced arbitration, blocking fighters from bringing a lawsuit for breach of contract, and class action waivers that waive a fighter's right to be awarded damages in settlement on behalf of a group. One of the crowning achievements of the original Muhammad Ali law was the establishment of a boxer's right to a private cause of action to assert their rights, which all Americans enjoy, to seek legal redress for unlawful injuries. H.R. 4624 fails to protect these protections within UBOs. Mr. Speaker, there's been a narrative that this is something that has unified the boxing world in terms of support for this bill. I would ask unanimous consent to have a letter entered dated just a few weeks ago, February 27th, 2026 from USA Boxing, the largest amateur boxing organization in America, withdrawing their endorsement that they gave the bill last January. I also ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from Top Rank Boxing, Attorney Robert Airman, who again criticized this bill again for the damage it's going to do to boxers' legal rights, and states that a UBO is deemed in compliance with such provisions simply by virtue of being recognized as a UBO. This is incredibly problematic and entirely unjustifiable. Put simply, there is no reason for Congress to actively remove these protections for those fighters who choose to sign with a UBO, and there's no reason for a UBO to be exempt from complying with these protective measures.
Without objection.
And lastly, I have a letter from Patrick English, who testified before the committee, who rebuts the myth that boxing is dying. Cable TV is dying, but boxing is signing very lucrative contracts with streaming services.
Without objection.
Again, Mr. Speaker, again, I just wanted to put on the record all of these
Gentleman's time has expired.
Mr. An additional minute.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill does not have consensus support from those, as proponents claim. And again, as been stated by Ms. Omar, I join with her in calling on the Senate to continue to work on this bill and focus on the achievements of Senator McCain in terms of protecting boxers' rights that are at risk with this legislation. And again, would ask again for members to oppose this bill when the time comes up for a vote. I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, a great member of the Education Workforce Committee, Mr. Harris.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I stand today, Mr. Speaker, to support the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. And Mr. Speaker, for decades, boxing has declined in the public eye, in part because of a fragmented structure that has left many fighters without the security and stability they deserve. This bill gives boxers more control over their careers, allowing them to choose whether to compete within a unified boxing organization or continue under the current system. The bill updates long-standing requirements to ensure proper medical oversight, including the presence of doctors and ambulances at every event. It includes my amendment, which better aligns these requirements with established industry practice and state laws in some of the nation's premier combat sports states, including Nevada. As a result, the bill now requires 2 ambulances and 2 doctors to be continuously present at professional boxing matches. I urge my colleagues to support this bill brought forward by my friend Representative Brian Jack that I believe will modernize boxing safety standards. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. McGarvey.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. You know, the term GOAT gets thrown around a lot these days. In fact, my middle school son came home recently asking us to buy him a pair of GOAT sweatpants. There's a movie that just came out produced by Steph Curry called GOAT. But in Louisville, Kentucky, we know that there is only one greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali. His 3 world titles, his gold medals, his footwork, his showmanship and charisma, they made him an icon inside the ring. And his work outside the ring, which is arguably more impressive, cemented that legacy. The GOAT. Ali often said he was, quote, the onlyest boxer in history who people asked questions like a senator. So it was only fitting that Congress named the bill in his honor when they set out to reform the boxing industry. And we do so again today as we consider further reforms. The first Ali Acts in 96 and 2000 secured significant reforms for boxers, guaranteeing transparency, protecting fighter safety, trying to erect a firewall between promoters and managers. But American boxing remains fractured and favors the interests of sanctioners and promoters over the fighters themselves. I think that's why a boxing landscape that produced 8 heavyweight gold medalists in the 10 Olympics between 1952 and 1988 has not produced a single one since. Today's bill is a step in the right direction, and I will vote yes. But like Ranking Members Scott and Omar, I believe there is more work to do on this bill before it gets to the president's desk. Boxing lifted Cassius Clay from Smoketown and gave Muhammad Ali to the world. That's a legacy worth fighting for. Thank you to my colleagues and to my dear friend Lonnie Ali, who continues to fight for boxers and for her late husband's legacy. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, the chairman of the Subcommittee on Workforce Protections, Mr. McKenzie.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 4624, the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. For generations, boxing stood at the center of American sports. It produced legends, inspired communities, and embodied the grit and determination that define our country. But today, the sport has become fragmented, marked by inconsistent standards, weak oversight, and too often, inadequate protections for fighters. As chairman of the Workforce Protection Subcommittee, I recently led a hearing examining these challenges. We heard directly from experts, advocates, and leaders in the sport about the urgent need to strengthen safety, improve transparency, and create real opportunities for fighters. At the end of the day, boxers are workers, and like every American worker, they deserve a safe and fair workplace. This bill takes important steps to get us there. It establishes clearer, more consistent standards across the sport, strengthens medical protections, and ensures fighters have access to fair pay and proper oversight. Just as importantly, it helps restore integrity and trust in the sport that has meant so much to so many Americans. H.R. 4624 is about putting American fighters first, protecting their health, respecting their dignity, and giving them a fair shot at success. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to close.
I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself the balance of the time. Mr. Speaker, this bill is far better today because of the bipartisan work that went into it. Together, we've improved safety standards, strengthened financial protections, and added important safeguards for fighters. These changes will help ensure that boxers are better protected, both in and out of the ring, and that the sport moves forward with greater integrity and accountability. But as all the speakers on this side have mentioned, there's more work that could be done to strengthen the bill, especially as it pertains to private right of action and binding arbitration. But this bill has come a long way and is significantly improved from its introduced version, so I support the bill and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would express my appreciation to the ranking member, Mr. Scott, for his efforts and work on this bill, and it's been always good to work with him. I greatly appreciate the work of the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Jack, and then his co-sponsor, Representative Davids, as well as Representative Omar, for the efforts that they have put into making this bill what it appears to be and stands to be, and the impact that it can have, as we note on it today. Like many Americans, I enjoy boxing movies like Rocky and Cinderella Man. I think the reason those stories resonate with so many is because they reflect what boxing is meant to represent: discipline, opportunity, a fair fight, and doggone toughness in the American way. I so enjoyed my colleague, Mr. Jordan, as he went through names that I recollect sitting with my twin brother and my father watching those historic boxing matches, and now being a short distance from the Kronk Gym, a historic gym where Emanuel Stewart and others train fighters to do the American thing: discipline, opportunity, fair fight. This bill is also reflective of the story of the American dream, that anyone can earn his or her shot through grit and determination. But in the real world, a fair fight requires rules that protect competitors as much as they promote competition. Today, professional boxing too often falls short of that standard. Too often, fighters are pushed into dangerous matches without proper medical oversight, even in the training that they do. Left navigating contracts with the lack of transparency and forced to shoulder risk without adequate recourse. That reality undermines athlete safety and public confidence in the sport. The Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act modernizes the framework of professional boxing to meet the expectation of today's athletes and today's fans. It strengthens protections for fighters, creates more opportunities, and helps restore integrity to the sport. At a time when interest in boxing is growing again, we have the chance to restore confidence in a sport that once inspired generations of Americans. Mr. Speaker, for the fighters of today and tomorrow, for the fans who believe in this sport, and for the enduring principle of fair competition, I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 4624, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 4624 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2474 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 486, H.R. 2474. A bill to require the Comptroller General of the United States to conduct a study on the capability of the Appalachian Regional Commission to include low-orbit satellites in broadband projects and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend the remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 2474 as amended.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I was proud to introduce the Expanding Appalachia's Broadband Access Act, which directs the Government Accountability Office to conduct a study on the capability of the Appalachian Regional Commission to include satellites in its broadband projects. Currently, the ARC can support targeted broadband projects in distressed rural communities to attract businesses and jobs. However, Appalachia is a vast region, and not all of its communities have access to fiber optic broadband service, which can be economically isolating for local businesses. I represent 13 counties in ARC's service area. The topography challenges in my district and the rest of Appalachia create unique challenges for traditional fiber optic broadband. Satellite broadband, on the other hand, with its far-reaching capabilities, can enable the delivery of high-speed internet to those more remote, difficult-to-access communities that do not currently have fiber optic infrastructure. Expanding access to this modern necessity will help incentivize the growth of new businesses in the region. With the potential to leverage this technology for business growth, ARC funding could go further in addressing economic development challenges in distressed communities. That's why it's crucial for the GAO to begin studying the ARC's ability to apply this critical technology to its mission of promoting regional economic growth. Mr. Speaker, I urge support of this bill and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I support H.R. 2474, expanding Appalachia's Broadband Access Act as amended. The bill requires the Comptroller General of the United States to conduct a study on the capability of the Appalachian Regional Commission to include low-orbit satellites in broadband projects. This study, conducted by the General Accountability Office, will, number one, assess whether these low-orbit satellites can meet business needs. Number two, evaluate the economic development growth in areas already utilizing low-orbit satellites. And number three, analyze the cost-effectiveness of implementing broadband via satellites. By directing the GAO to study this important issue, Congress can help ensure that small businesses and residents in rural and Appalachian communities can benefit from emerging technologies and continue developing economically. I support this important bill, urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers and I am prepared to close. I reserve.
Reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support H.R. 2474, expanding Appalachia's Broadband Access Act as amended. Urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, by directing a study on the Appalachian Regional Commission's ability to implement satellite broadband projects into its portfolio, this legislation will help the Appalachian economy continue to advance and grow. With that, I urge support of H.R. 2474, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 2474, as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6480.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 468, H.R. 6480. A bill to direct the Administrator of General Services to submit a report to Congress on the state of the real estate portfolio of the Public Building Service and for the purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 6480.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 6480 directs the General Services Administration to submit a report to Congress on the state of the real estate portfolio of the GSA's Public Buildings Service. I want to thank the Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management Ranking Member Mr. Stanton, along with Subcommittee Chairman Mr. Perry for their work on this legislation. H.R. 6480 improves transparency and supports congressional oversight of the GSA's real estate portfolio by directing the GSA to begin reissuing its State of the Portfolio report. The GSA used to produce a State of the Portfolio report each year that contained critical and useful information. The report provided the taxpayer and Congress with a clear accounting of the GSA's real estate holdings, including a breakdown of costs and liabilities and updates on deferred maintenance. Since the GSA stopped issuing this report nearly a decade ago, the information has become less accessible. This bill will ensure that the GSA reissues these reports to improve congressional oversight and ensure that the GSA is accountable to the American taxpayer. Mr. Speaker, I urge support of this legislation and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support H.R. 6480, legislation introduced by myself and co-sponsored by Representative Scott Perry. The federal real estate portfolio is being reshaped at a speed and scale this institution has never seen. Last year, under DOGE, leases were terminated overnight, buildings were emptied, and entire agencies were displaced. Through all of it, Congress was given little information about what was being sold or surrendered. This should concern every single member of this chamber, regardless of political party, and this has been a problem under both Democratic and Republican administrations. The GSA used to keep Congress informed. They produced the State of the Portfolio Report, a clear, comprehensive accounting of the federal real estate footprint. They haven't done so since 2013. And now, in 2026, after an aggressive reshaping of the federal government's real estate portfolio, Congress is flying blind. H.R. 6480 turns the lights back on. This bill, introduced by myself and co-sponsored by Representative Perry, directs the Administrator of the General Services to submit an annual report to Congress on the state of the federal real estate portfolio. Every lease signed and terminated, every square foot leased and occupied, every GSA-owned building disposed of, every plan to relocate federal agencies, all of it on the record in front of Congress, accountable to the people of this country. Congress has a constitutional obligation to know what is happening to federal property that belongs to the American taxpayer. No administration of either party should be making unilateral decisions about the public's assets without this body having full visibility. I support this important bill, urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers, and I am prepared to close. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
I support H.R. 6480, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, in closing, this legislation will increase transparency of GSA's real estate holdings and ensure there is greater accountability to the American taxpayer for the management of our federal real estate portfolio. With that, I urge support of H.R. 6480, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 6480? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6481.
Without objection. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 476, H.R. 6481. A bill to direct the Administrator of General Services and the Director of the Federal Protective Service to establish guidance relating to emergency communication protocols for public buildings and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend the remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 6481.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Federal Building Threat Notification Act directs the General Services Administration and the Federal Protective Service to establish guidance on emergency communication protocols for public buildings. This legislation was developed after the committee received a report detailing crime that occurs in and around federal buildings. The report detailed that in fiscal year 2024, there were over 3,500 incidents of crime in and around federal buildings recorded nationwide. This data paints a clear picture of the current system in which the safety of federal workers and visitors to GSA buildings is not a guarantee. It's even more critical today, given the heightened security threats, to ensure there are clear communication protocols for occupants and visitors to federal facilities. I want to thank Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management Ranking Member, Mr. Stanton, along with Subcommittee Chairman, Mr. Perry, for their work on this very important piece of legislation. Mr. Speaker, I urge support of this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Federal employees deserve to work in safety and security, and the Americans who go to federal buildings to access essential services deserve to do so with the same assurances. A 2025 GAO report found that in fiscal year 2024 alone, there were over 3,500 recorded incidents at federal facilities across this country, 763 threats, 142 weapons violations, 9 arson attacks, 3 homicides, and 1 kidnapping. These are attacks on the women and men who show up every day to serve the American people. And right now, in this political climate, federal employees are being targeted online, in person, and in the buildings where they work. The hostility directed at our civil servants has reached a boiling point, and Congress must act to keep people safe. But threats don't only come from people. When Hurricane Katrina struck the Gulf Coast in August 29, 2005, 83 federal facilities in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama were significantly damaged. And back-to-back hurricanes, Irma and Maria, severely damaged Puerto Rico's federal buildings and federal courthouses in 2017. Storms are only getting stronger and more destructive. It is critical that workers and visitors to federal buildings know what to do in case of an emergency. H.R. 6481, the Federal Building Threat Notification Act, introduced by myself and co-sponsored by Congressman Perry, directs the Administrator of General Services and the Director of Federal Protective Service to develop and disseminate a clear, actionable emergency communication protocols for public buildings. The guidance will include best practices and protocols to inform building tenants of threats to the buildings or their occupants and instructions for safety practices in response to threats or heightened risk. The Federal Building Threat Notification Act is common sense, it's good policy, and I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this important bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers and am prepared to close. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
I support H.R. 6481, the Federal Building Threat Notification Act, and urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, in closing, this legislation will ensure that the GSA and the FPS establish standard operating procedures that will help keep agency tenants better informed when there are threats to the building or its occupants. This is an important step Congress can take to increase safety at federal buildings for both federal employees and visitors. With that, I urge support of H.R. 6481 and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 6481? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, no motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 7388 as amended.
Without objection, the clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 483, H.R. 7388. A bill to direct the Administrator of General Service to convene consultation meetings to identify alternative financing solutions for the construction of new public buildings that will reduce costs to the federal government and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 7388 as amended.
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, H.R. 7388, the Smart Space Act of 2026, directs the General Services Administration to consult with real estate experts on how alternative financing and public-private partnerships can be used for public building projects to reduce costs to the taxpayer. Last year, the Thomas R. Carper Water Resources Development Act of 2024 was signed into law. That legislation included significant public buildings reforms that have the potential to save billions of dollars for taxpayers. As the GSA and other executive agencies have implemented these reforms to reduce costly space, a key challenge agencies have faced is funding activities that may be needed before buildings can be sold and agencies relocated to less expensive space. In addition, recent hearings held by the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, as well as reports by the Government Accountability Office and the Public Buildings Reform Board, have revealed billions of dollars in liabilities associated with our owned real estate assets due to deferred maintenance accumulated over the years. We need to identify new funding solutions to these problems that don't rely on increasing taxpayers' dollars for the space consolidation efforts. The Smart Space Act of 2026 directs the GSA, in consultation with real estate experts, to recommend alternative financing solutions to provide a list of projects for which those solutions would make sense. This will provide the President and Congress with information on viable options to address the challenge of acquiring the capital needed to prepare buildings for sale and reduce the liability to the taxpayer. I want to thank my colleague from Missouri, Mr. Burleson, for his leadership on this important issue. Mr. Speaker, I urge support of this legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I rise in support of H.R. 7388, the Smart Space Act, as amended. The General Services Administration's portfolio of owned buildings are now on average over 52 years old, and many of the buildings have not undergone any significant modernizations since they were constructed. In 2025, the GAO reported that GSA has a $6.1 billion deferred maintenance and repair backlog. In 2026, the Public Buildings Reform Board reported that GSA's backlog was approximately $50 billion. Whether the cost to repair GSA's building is $6.1 billion or $50 billion, GSA does not currently have the funding. The Smart Space Act is intended to address this funding shortfall by directing GSA to identify alternative financing solutions for the construction, renovation, or, when necessary, disposal of public buildings. GSA already uses alternative financing in the form of public-private partnerships, or P3s, to procure energy savings and facility improvements with no upfront capital costs or appropriations from Congress. When used appropriately and when both partners are held accountable, public-private partnerships can help deliver high-cost, technically complex projects more quickly, leverage private sector resources and expertise, and reduce construction and operational risks for the federal government. H.R. 7388, as amended, directs GSA to convene consultation meetings with real estate experts to identify alternative financing solutions for the construction or renovation of public buildings. Learning from experts is always a good thing. I support this bill and urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it's my honor to yield 2 minutes to the author of this legislation, Mr. Burleson of Missouri.
The gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. And I rise today to support my bill, the Smart Spaces Act of 2026, legislation that modernizes how the federal government manages its real estate portfolio. Today, the federal government holds billions of dollars in underutilized and outdated federal buildings, while hardworking American taxpayers are left to cover the costs of their repair, upkeep, and maintenance. If Congress is serious about being responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars, then Congress must also be serious about how the federal government manages its real estate. This is exactly what the Smart Spaces Act is designed to do. The Smart Spaces Act requires the General Services Administration to convene real estate experts to identify an alternative financing solutions for acquisition or of disposal of federal properties through leveraging public-private partnerships. These partnerships have been used successfully by both the private sector and state governments for years to modernize infrastructure while keeping costs at bay. Public-private partnerships are proven to lower long-run costs, minimize taxpayer exposure, and deliver reliable infrastructure more efficiently than traditional federal procurement methods. Importantly, this legislation does not mandate any new construction or spend a single taxpayer dollar. Instead, it creates a framework for disciplined decision-making while retaining full congressional and presidential oversight. It also encourages the federal government to engage in public-private partnerships, which is both practical and a responsible step towards modernizing our federal infrastructure while ensuring fiscal discipline. The Smart Space Act is about doing more with less, respecting the taxpayer and bringing common sense to how the federal government finances its core assets. And I thank Chairman Graves for his leadership and commitment to advancing this legislation. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman reserves.
Yes.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
I reserve the balance of my time. Do you have other speakers?
Gentleman reserves.
Prepared to close.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized. Oh, gentleman reserves. All right. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support H.R. 7388, the Smart Space Act as amended, and urge my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, in closing, this legislation will help identify alternative financing solutions for real estate projects, thereby reducing costs and liabilities to taxpayers. H.R. 7388 is a common sense solution that ensures agencies can continue to responsibly reduce the federal real estate portfolio. With that, I urge support of H.R. 7388, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 7388, as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass House Concurrent Resolution 73.
Without objection, the clerk will report the title of the concurrent resolution.
House Calendar Number 65, House Concurrent Resolution 73. Concurrent resolution authorizing the use of the Capitol grounds for the National Peace Officers Memorial Service and the National Honor Guard and Pipe Band Exhibition.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on House Concurrent Resolution 73.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Concurrent Resolution 73 authorizes the use of the Capitol grounds for the 45th Annual National Peace Officers Memorial event. I am proud to continue the long tradition of supporting the Fraternal Order of Police and honoring the law enforcement officers who died in the line of duty in 2025. Law enforcement officers across the country put their lives on the line every day to help keep us safe. There were 17 officers killed in Ohio in 2025. Last year, I paid my respects to Deputy Larry Ray Henderson from the Union Township, Ohio, tragically lost his life in the line of duty. Larry joined the ranks of those who courageously made the ultimate sacrifice while protecting our communities. And I also want to recognize Officer Larry Cox from Chillicothe and Officer Dave Poling, who did the same. I'm humbled to honor their legacies today. We all owe a debt of gratitude to the police officers who continue to serve despite the risks they face every day. Mr. Speaker, I urge support of this resolution and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves his time. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
I rise in support of H.Con. Res. 73, legislation introduced by myself and Representative Perry. This resolution authorizes the use of the Capitol grounds for events related to the 45th Annual National Peace Officers Memorial Service on May 15th, 2026. The National Fraternal Order of Police will host this event to honor the federal, state, and local law enforcement officers who lost their lives in the line of duty in the year 2025. In my home state of Arizona, we honor Officer Gabriel Facio of the Apache Junction Police Department, who was killed in the line of duty in June of 2025. Officer Facio served with the Apache Junction Police Department for nearly 4 years and had previously served as an officer in the city of Phoenix. He is survived by his wife, daughter, son, parents, and a grandchild. Last month, we lost 2 more Arizona heroes. State Trooper Hunter Bennett was killed in a helicopter crash alongside his pilot, retired Lieutenant Colonel Robert Skanke, while responding to an active shooter incident. Trooper Bennett was just 28 years old, and he was married to his high school sweetheart, Brianna. He graduated top of his class from the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy after graduating magna cum laude from Arizona State University. Pilot Skanke retired from the United States Marine Corps after 22 highly decorated years. He went on to join the Arizona Department of Public Safety, serving as an aviation supervisor. He leaves behind his wife, Chitska, and 4 children. Their service and sacrifice remind us that the dangers of our law enforcement officers face, they are real and they are ever present. We honor Officer Facio, Trooper Bennett, Pilot Skanke, and all officers throughout the country for their sacrifices and devotion to protecting our communities. In addition to the families and friends of the deceased, event organizers are expected 25,000 police officers from around the country to be in attendance. Additionally, this resolution authorizes the use of Capitol grounds for the National Honor Guard and Pipe Band exhibition on May 14, 2026. I support this bipartisan resolution. I urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Arizona reserves his time. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, the chairman of the Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management, Mr. Perry.
Gentleman, Mr. Perry is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank my colleague from Ohio, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, also my colleague from Arizona. I am extremely honored and humbled to once again introduce this resolution alongside the Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management Subcommittee ranking member, Mr. Greg Stanton, Representative Stanton from Arizona. This year marks the 45th annual National Peace Officers Memorial Event, which honors our law enforcement officers who have made the ultimate sacrifice. According to the Fraternal Order of Police, over the past 5 years, more than 2,000 police officers have been shot in the line of duty. In 2025, there were 347 shot in the line of duty, 45 of whom were killed. It is completely unacceptable. Tragically, 3 of those deaths were my constituents, my bosses. On September 17th, last year, a gunman ambushed police officers who were serving an arrest warrant. During the attack, 3 police officers were killed and 2 more were wounded. The officers who died in the line of duty were Detective Sergeant Cody Michael Becker, Detective Isaiah D. Emmenheiser, and Detective Mark Edward Baker. All 3 officers were longtime veterans of the Northern York County Regional Police Department, Mr. Speaker. And this memorial service is for them and those like them, and all the officers that will come to attend and think about their fallen comrades. These are the people in our community that run to the danger, that run to the sound of the guns, that get up in the middle of the night not knowing whether they're coming home, that do the shift work, that are underpaid and under-respected now in our society, even among some of their very own leaders, their very own elected leaders. That's why this memorial service this year is more important than ever. It is my sincere hope that this memorial service will bring some level of comfort to the families of the men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice for our safety and for the safety of their community. I urge my colleagues all to support this resolution. I thank the gentleman from Arizona and the gentleman from Ohio, and I yield the balance of the time, Mr. Speaker.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves his time. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll proceed with a short closing statement. I support HCON Res 73. At a time of hyperpartisanship in this body, it is good that we can come together unanimously in a bipartisan way to support the law enforcement officers and their families who have paid the ultimate sacrifice in support of their communities. I urge my colleagues to support HCON Res 73, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Arizona yields back his time. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, in closing, I want to thank Subcommittee Chairman Perry for his continued leadership on this important piece of legislation. The memorial service authorized in House Concurrent Resolution 73 is one we here in Congress can ensure the men and women who put their lives on the line every day are honored, and that those who have made the ultimate sacrifice receive the recognition they so justly deserve. With that, I urge support of House Concurrent Resolution 73, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Ohio yields back his time. All time is now yielded back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Concurrent Resolution 73? Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The concurrent resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the distinguished gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 7342 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 488, H.R. 7342. A bill to amend the Public Works and Economic Development Act of 1965 to provide for certain grant eligibility relating to projects that facilitate the relocation to the United States of source of employment located outside the United States and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Figures, each control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 7342 as amended.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. H.R. 7342, the Made in America Jobs Act of 2026, promotes the reshoring of jobs and industry back to the United States. The Economic Development Administration is the only federal agency whose sole priority is to support economic development and growth in distressed communities nationwide. The EDA's various funding opportunities, like the Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, invest in the development of local infrastructure to attract businesses and jobs into distressed and rural communities. Prioritizing the return of jobs and manufacturing to distressed communities will not only improve the national economy as a whole, but will also help rebuild the job markets in the small towns and communities that are the backbone of the American economy. H.R. 7342 advances the President's economic agenda by strengthening American manufacturing, leveraging existing EDA programs to incentivize companies to bring production and manufacturing jobs back to the United States. Earlier this year, the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure heard testimony from the EDA about how legislation just like this one, H.R. 7342, will help improve the lives of Americans across the country. I want to thank the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Hurd, for his leadership on this legislation. Mr. Speaker, I urge support of this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves his time. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, rise in support of H.R. 7342, the Made in America Jobs Act, as amended, legislation introduced by myself and my friend from Colorado, Representative Jeff Hurd. In 2024, Congress reauthorized the U.S. Economic Development Administration for the first time in over 20 years. This reauthorization made significant revisions to EDA, providing the agency with tools and resources it needs to support local economic growth and success in the worldwide economy. One change this legislation made was to allow EDA to consider new criteria when awarding grants that promote long-term investment and growth. The Made in America Jobs Act builds on this progress by further expanding grant eligibility to projects that facilitate the relocation of employment sources from outside of the country to inside of the United States, and the growth of the domestic manufacturing and customer service sectors. By directing EDA to consider projects that aid these efforts when awarding grants for public works, planning, training, and other critical activities, Congress can continue to support established and emerging industries while creating new economic opportunities for both rural and urban communities alike. I support this bill as amended and urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Alabama reserves his time. Gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Speaker, it's my honor to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Hurd.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 7342, the Made in America Jobs Act of 2026, which I am proud to lead with my colleague from Alabama, Congressman Shamari Figures. This is a straightforward, practical bill. It ensures that Economic Development Administration funds can be used to support projects that help bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States, especially in communities that need them the most, all without creating new programs or increasing spending. Now, manufacturing does not move one factory at a time. It moves in ecosystems. It requires roads, utilities, workforce, and sites that are ready for investment. Too often, rural communities have the land, the workforce, and certainly the work ethic, but they lose out because they don't have the infrastructure in place when an opportunity comes along. In western and southern Colorado, I see that every day. We have communities that could support things like agricultural processing facilities, equipment repair and fabrication shops, small-scale energy manufacturing, and value-added production for the crops and resources that we already produce. But when a company looks at a site and sees that the water, sewer, or access roads aren't ready, the project goes somewhere else. That means fewer good-paying jobs, and it means more young people leaving our communities to find opportunity elsewhere. This legislation helps fix that. It gives communities the tools to get sites ready, to compete for investment, and to keep more of that economic activity right here at home. It strengthens our industrial base, it supports rural economies, and it does it in a targeted and fiscally responsible way. I thank Chairman Graves, I thank Congressman Figures and our staffs for their work on this bill, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and with that, I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves his time. Gentleman from Alabama.
Mr. Speaker, this is a common sense piece of legislation that incentivizes companies and corporations to bring jobs back to America. We have seen over the better part of the last century the outsourcing of American jobs to offshore. This gives us an opportunity to make real, tangible improvements in terms of those efforts to recruit those companies back here to the United States, and not just to the big cities in the United States. This is an effort that will allow us to be able to put in place the resources and the incentives to bring those jobs to places like Macon County, Alabama, Pike County, Alabama, Monroe County, Bullock County, places that most of America has never heard of, but places that most of America has very similar communities in their backyards. And so I support H.R. 7342, the Made in America Jobs Act, as amended, and urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Alabama yields back his time. The gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. H.R. 7342 is a vital piece of legislation that will help grow the American economy, bring jobs back from overseas, and strengthen our local communities. I'd also like to ask unanimous consent to enter the letter exchange between the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the Financial Services Committee regarding H.R. 7342.
Without objection.
This legislation ensures we are focusing on supporting the local economies that employ our neighbors and allow for increased job opportunities. With that, I urge support of H.R. 7342, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Ohio yields back his time. All time is yielded back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 7342, as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6618 as amended.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 471, H.R. 6618. A bill to require the Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration to conduct a study on drone incursions on wildfire suppression and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Figures, each will control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 6618.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am proud to support this bipartisan common sense legislation that requires the Federal Aviation Administration, in coordination with its federal partners, to conduct a study and produce a report on the effects of unmanned aircraft systems incursions on wildfire suppression efforts. Federal, state, and local responses to wildfires are incredibly dynamic and require sanitized airspace to ensure a rapid response and ultimately the effectiveness of an operation. The study and report required in the legislation will produce valuable recommendations and ensure lawmakers have the necessary information and facts to craft informed policy. Furthermore, the study will assess the delays of wildfire suppression efforts associated with unlawful UAS incursions and identify the taxpayer resources expended as a result of the incursions. We witnessed the negative effects that UAS incursions can have on wildfire aerial responses last January during the Pacific Palisades fires, when an unauthorized UAS flying within a temporary flight restriction struck the wing of a fixed-wing Super Scooper aircraft, endangering the life of the pilot and causing more than $65,000 in damage. Mr. Speaker, I urge support of this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Alabama.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I rise in support of H.R. 6618, the Wildfire Aerial Response Safety Act as amended. This bipartisan legislation introduced by my good friend from Oregon and fellow freshman, Representative Bynum, Representative Neguse from Colorado, and Representatives Crane and Siscomani from Arizona. The devastating impacts of wildfires are seen far too often across this country, destroying local communities and the livelihood of many of our constituents. According to the National Interagency Fire Center, there were at least 34 drone incursions into active wildfire suppression areas last year. Of those 34, 29 incursions forced aerial firefighting efforts to be grounded and significantly delayed critical response efforts. Most notably, when, as my colleague Representative Taylor just mentioned, a drone actually struck a Canadian Super Scooper plane during last year's catastrophic wildfires in Southern California. Whether these drone disruptions are intentionally malicious or the result of uninformed operators, they are a costly nuisance to federal wildfire suppression efforts and needlessly risk the lives of first responders and law enforcement, both those in the air and those on the ground. These brave women and men put their lives on the line to fight dangerous fires and should not have to deal with the drone incursions while doing their jobs. H.R. 6618 requires the FAA to evaluate the number and impact of drone incursions over the previous 5 years, including any cost to the federal government, the effectiveness of educational public outreach, and deploying approved counter-UAS systems to detect and mitigate against drone interference. This study and the recommendations will be key in establishing necessary safeguards against drone incursions during wildfire suppression activities. With the growing number and severity of wildfires across the country, we cannot afford to let these dangerous drone incursions go unabated, lest we run the risk of distracting or endangering our firefighters and our first responders. These brave individuals put their lives on the line for us, and today they need our assistance. This is the first step to delivering it. I support this legislation and urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers, and I am prepared to close, and I'll reserve.
Gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Alabama.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to yield 5 minutes to the representative from Oregon, Ms. Bynum.
Gentlewoman from Oregon is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I rise in strong support of H.R. 6618, my Wildfire Aerial Response Safety Act. You see, wildfires are no longer seasonal. They're year-round threats that are growing more intense, more destructive, and more dangerous for the communities that we serve and the responders that we rely on. In 2020, Oregon experienced one of the most devastating wildfire seasons in our state's history. More than 1 million acres burned, entire communities were displaced, and for days, the air across our state and much of the West was among the worst in the world. What struck me from that moment wasn't just the scale of the destruction, but the importance of fast-acting firefighting to slow the spread and protect lives. And one of the tools that firefighters use in Oregon is aerial firefighting. But personal aircraft like drones can prevent that tool from being used. And that's because aviation rules require grounding all aircraft when an unauthorized drone is sighted in active response zones. Now, when that happens, it can stop water drops, delay rescues, and interrupt information gathering, which puts nearby communities at risk. Our ground crews lose critical visibility and protection, which increases the danger for firefighters, rescues, and residents. Just last August, in my home state of Oregon, a recreational drone delayed the initial air attack of the flat fire by nearly 30 minutes. This is the window of time that it is most critical in fighting a fire. And that's exactly the problem my bill is designed to address. The Wildfire Aerial Response Safety Act ensures that our aerial wildfire response is not just fast, but safe, coordinated, and effective. The bill improves safety and effectiveness of aerial wildfire response by addressing the growing threat of drone interference. It directs the FAA to evaluate recent disruptions, develop solutions, and to prevent future interference. And of course, it makes sure that the public understands the risks of flying drones near active wildfires. Because, sir, the reality is simple. When the airspace isn't managed well, firefighting slows down, and lives are put at risk. This is a common-sense bipartisan bill that reflects how wildfire response is evolving in real time. It supports the pilots and the first responders doing this dangerous work, and it helps ensure we are giving them the tools and conditions that they need to succeed. I want to thank Representatives Neguse, Crane, and Siscomani for working with me on this bill, and the leadership of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee for passing the bill through committee without opposition. Protecting firefighters and improving how quickly we respond to wildfires will always remain my top priority. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 6618, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Does the gentleman from Alabama wish to reserve his time?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Speaker, we're prepared to close, and I'll reserve.
Thank you. Gentleman wishes to reserve his time to close. The gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We must do everything that we can to help our firefighters and our first responders battling wildfires. We know drone use is becoming more prolific, and with that, we are seeing increased risks to the efforts to battle these fires. Sometimes it's people with curiosity, out of curiosity. Sometimes it's people out of carelessness or recklessness, or sometimes it's just pure stupidity. But at the end of the day, we have an obligation in this House to do everything that we can to protect our firefighters, to make sure that they are equipped with the resources and the laws that they need to be able to do their jobs effectively. That is why I support H.R. 6618 and urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Alabama yields back his time. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, in the unfortunate event of a wildfire, once that spark is ignited, the only thing that matters is extinguishing the flames as quickly as possible to protect our neighbors, forests, and properties. We owe all aerial firefighters a great debt of gratitude, and in the event of a wildfire, personally, I like for them to be focused on the task at hand rather than worrying about identifying and avoiding unauthorized UASs flying within a temporary flight restriction. To reiterate, this common sense study will produce valuable recommendations and ensure lawmakers have the information and facts to craft informed policy. Mr. Speaker, I urge support of this bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Ohio yields back his time. All time is yielded for the purpose of debate. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6618 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6267.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 469, H.R. 6267. A bill to direct the Comptroller General of the United States to conduct a study on the impediments to digital documentation and verification in the aviation supply chain and for the purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Figures, will each control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 6267.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The safety of our airspace is and has always been the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee's top priority. That commitment to aviation safety extends down to the raw materials and components used to manufacture and maintain aircraft that are operational in the national airspace system. Recent reports of bad actors falsifying paperwork leading to unapproved parts entering the supply chain are not only highly concerning, but also underscore the need to authenticate documents and intercept counterfeit parts. Unapproved parts and falsified documentation threaten the safety of our aviation system and the integrity of our supply chain, which we worked so diligently to strengthen. Mr. Speaker, American manufacturers, repair stations, air carriers, aircraft lessors, aircraft brokers, and part brokers deserve and need the tools to easily identify falsified documentation and ensure they are not buying, selling, or installing counterfeit parts. H.R. 6267 will identify barriers to tools that can help identify counterfeit parts, ensuring everyone in the aviation supply chain has the ability to verify the authenticity of the materials and parts they purchase. Mr. Speaker, I urge support of this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves his time. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 6267, the Aviation Supply Chain Safety and Security Digitization Act, bipartisan legislation introduced by my friend Representative Knott and Representative Skolton out of Michigan. U.S. innovation, economic growth, and global leadership are impossible without our nation's aerospace industry. This is an industry that is particularly relevant to me, representing Mobile, my hometown, where we are the proud home to an Airbus facility. Unfortunately, the last few years have taught us that through a pandemic, tariffs, and quality control issues, just how much supply chain disruptions can spiral and compound. It is essential that Congress take this lesson and pass legislation to reduce the risk of these compounding disruptions from happening in the future. H.R. 6267 directs the GAO to study the impediments to the use of digital documentation and verification in the aviation supply chain to aid in identifying falsified documentation and counterfeit parts. As a major driver of the U.S. economy, we must ensure that aerospace supply chains remain resilient. To achieve that, we must also remove any unnecessary or antiquated barriers where we can. This bill will help Congress find ways to expedite the aerospace supply chain's digital transition. I support this legislation and urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Alabama reserves his time. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my honor to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Knott.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak in favor of my bill, H.R. 6267, the Aviation Supply Chain and Security Digitization Act. I want to thank Chairman Graves for the opportunity to speak today, and also thank my colleague from Michigan, Representative Hillary Skolton, for joining me as a co-sponsor of this important piece of legislation. Mr. Speaker, we often take for granted the delicate complexity of airplanes, millions of parts and components working together to ensure passenger safety. The FAA protects the supply chain by requiring certification documents for each part following its manufacturing, assembly, and repair. Known as an Authorized Release Certificate, or an ARC, these documents certify each part meets rigorous FAA airworthiness standards before an FAA-certified technician can perform any necessary work. Unfortunately today, Mr. Speaker, ARCs and similar certificates represent a weak link in our aviation supply chain security. Despite many advances since the Wright brothers' first flight in my home state of North Carolina, the FAA's record keeping is stuck in 1903. Ink and paper hold up the efficiency and the security of this delicate supply chain. A few forged signatures are all that it takes for a nefarious actor to inject hundreds, if not thousands, of fraudulently and potentially dangerous parts into planes around the world. Unfortunately, this is not hypothetical. This very scenario has already happened. Just in the summer of 2023, service employees in Europe discovered that some of the engine's parts that they were working on were noticeably older than their documentation indicated, and they alerted the appropriate authorities. It was then discovered that questionable parts had infiltrated more than 126 airplane engines, affecting Delta, American, United, and Southwest Airlines, among others. This bill is a simple, industry-driven step towards defending against similar occurrences. This bill
would require the GAO to conduct a study into barriers that prevent the FAA and the aviation industry from modernizing their supply chain security by digitizing ARCs and other safety documents, which would prevent bad actors from so easily compromising these important records. My bill would also require the GAO to make prompt recommendations to Congress on accelerating the FAA's adoption of digital documentation and a path to voluntary adoption within the industry. Again, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all the members of the aviation industry who joined the Aviation Supply Chain Integrity Coalition. The coalition's quick and focused efforts in response to the 2023 incident that I just mentioned laid the important groundwork for this bill. I once again want to thank Chairman Graves and Representative Schulten for their support, and I urge all of my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 6267. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I am prepared to close, and I'll reserve.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, we must learn from past lessons. As Representative Knott just explained the incident that happened in 2023, we have the tools at our disposal to be able to deal with this, to be able to better secure our supply chain in the aerospace industry, and we have an obligation to do so. That is why I support H.R. 6267 and urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Alabama yields back his time. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In closing, I'd like to thank Representative Knott from North Carolina for his leadership on this important issue. To reiterate, unapproved parts and falsified documentation threaten the safety of our aviation system and the integrity of our supply chain, which holds it all together. This legislation will improve aviation safety by identifying barriers to adopting digital tools to verify the authenticity of materials and parts in the aviation supply chain. Furthermore, H.R. 6267, the Aviation Supply Chain Safety and Security Digitization Act of 2025, will support the Federal Aviation Administration as they work to digitize legacy paper systems as required by the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024. Mr. Speaker, as a representative of Ohio, where the Wright brothers built and designed the very first airplane, I urge support of this bill and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Ohio yields back his time. All time is now yielded. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 5267? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. What purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5663 as amended.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 470, H.R. 5663. A bill to modify the termination of the Aviation Consumer Protection Advisory Committee and for other purposes.
To the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Figures, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 5663. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman may move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Travel advisors and ticket agents serve as critical consumer-facing component of our nation's air transportation system. Collectively, they sell more than 780,000 airline tickets each day and were responsible for over $99 billion in airline ticket sales last year. Because they work directly with travelers, they understand firsthand what works well for consumers and what does not. And their perspective deserves to be included when shaping consumer protection regulations. This bill builds on the bipartisan work of this committee during the last Congress. In the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024, we reauthorized the Aviation Consumer Protection Advisory Committee, or ACPAC. A similar provision to the ACPAC Modernization Act was included in the House-passed FAA reauthorization, but was ultimately removed during conference negotiations. This legislation simply ensures that a representative of ticket agents has a seat on the advisory committee. Madam Speaker, I urge support of this legislation and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 5663, the ACPAC Modernization Act, bipartisan legislation introduced by my friend from Nevada, Representative Titus. Congress has delivered several key victories to the flying public to help them have a better flying experience. This included requirements for passengers to receive automatic refunds, requiring airlines to develop policies to reimburse passengers for travel, meals, and hotel accommodations when experiencing a flight disruption, and requiring airlines to allow young children to sit next to their parents. The Aviation Consumer Protection Advisory Committee, or ACPAC, established by Congress during the 2012 FAA reauthorization, has helped implement these reforms as it advises the Transportation Secretary on aviation consumer protection issues. However, the advisory committee is currently missing a critical voice, the voice of ticket agents. In 2024, ticket agents sold over 780,000 airline tickets a day, totaling nearly $100 billion in annual sales. Their expertise in aviation consumer experience and industry is vital to ACPAC's work. However, even as a substantial portion of the flying public relies on their services, ticket agents are currently not represented on the committee. This means they will be implementing many of the rules that fall directly on them, since they are the point of sale, but have no input on how these rules will be implemented. Their voices simply are not currently heard. This could potentially leave consumers who purchase tickets from online ticket agents worse off. That is why I support H.R. 5663 as amended. This common sense bill would rectify this oversight by adding a representative of ticket agents to the ACPAC, allowing them to advise on the very rules they will be responsible for implementing. This will put ticket agents at the same level on the commission as air carriers, travel management companies, nonprofits with expertise in disability and accessibility issues, and other important industry advisors to the DOT. This bill builds upon Section 508 of the 2024 FAA reauthorization, which extended the authorization of ACPAC through September 30th, 2028. I support this bill now to fulfill the potential of ACPAC and urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no more speakers and I'm prepared to close, and I'll reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I wish to yield 5 minutes to the representative from Nevada, Ms. Titus.
The gentleman has 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the gentleman from Alabama for giving me this time to speak and for his eloquent defense of my legislation. H.R. 5663, the ACPAC Modernization Act. The Aviation Consumer Protection Advisory Committee, or ACPAC, provides recommendations to the Department of Transportation for improving consumer protection in aviation. My bill would simply, as you have heard, expand the committee's membership to include a representative for ticket agents. There are 2,700 travel advisors in Nevada, and in 2024 alone, they generated over $1 billion in sales. These same travel advisors are an integral part of our travel and tourism economy. For example, in 2024, Las Vegas welcomed 41.7 million visitors, yielding over $86 billion in economic impact. In my district alone, the travel industry also supports $1.6 billion in state and local taxes and is the top industry for employment. Supporting our tourism economy is one of my top priorities in Congress, and that effort is more important than ever now that the Trump slump has hit our travel destinations. This bill will give travel agents a seat at the table as a voting member of ACPAC alongside air carriers, airport operators, and other stakeholders. Ticket agents build their business on their unmatched expertise dealing with what the public needs and wants when traveling. Accordingly, they will provide valuable insights into ACPAC's work. When we prioritize consumer protection and the passenger experience in aviation, everyone wins and everyone enjoys the trip even more. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no more speakers and I'm prepared to close. I'll reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Congress has delivered victories for the flying public before, and it's time we do so again by modernizing ACPAC. Ticket agents, they are in many cases, the face and the voice of airlines. They have to deal with so much as it relates to implementing the rules, to delivering bad news, to hearing the attitudes, to hearing the feedback. of customers. That is why I support HR 5663 as amended, to give them the voice that they deserve in this process, and urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. HR 5663 reflects a simple but important principle. Those who work directly with consumers should have a voice in the policies that affect them. Travel advisors and ticket agents interact with travelers every day, helping families, small businesses, and communities navigate an increasingly complex aviation marketplace. Their practical, real-world experience is invaluable. By adding a representative of ticket agents to the Aviation Consumer Protection Advisory Committee, we strengthen the advisory process without expanding bureaucracy or imposing new mandates. This is a measured, bipartisan step that builds on the work we began in the last Congress and ensures the committee benefits from a more complete range of industry and consumer perspectives. Madam Speaker, I urge support of this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill HR 5663 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass HR 6427 as amended.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 475, H.R. 6427, a bill to amend Title 49 United States Code to permit the use of the state highway standards for airfield pavement construction and improvement under certain circumstances and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Figures, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on HR 6427.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. HR 6427, the Airport Regulatory Relief Act of 2025, is a common-sense piece of legislation that reduces the burden on states seeking to use state highway specifications for airfield projects at non-primary airports serving smaller aircraft. Our nation's small and general aviation airports are vital links for rural communities, connecting them to essential services, supporting local jobs, and strengthening the national aviation system. Under current law, states seeking to use state highway pavement standards for airfield projects must formally request approval from the Secretary of Transportation. This legislation cuts unnecessary red tape by allowing states to notify the Secretary rather than navigate a lengthy approval process. At the same time, the bill preserves safety by maintaining the requirement that the Secretary determine that such standards will not negatively affect aviation safety. By streamlining the process while upholding safety, this legislation will help deliver airfield improvements faster and more efficiently to the communities that need them most. I would like to thank Representative Begich for his leadership on this issue. And Madam Speaker, I urge support of this legislation and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserved. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 6427, the Aviation Regulatory Relief Act, as amended, introduced by my colleague from Alaska, Representative Begich. Current law provides small general aviation non-primary airports flexibility in how they construct runways by granting them the choice to use either federal aviation paving standards or state highway paving standards. These options come with stipulations that the runways only service small planes, A, and B, the DOT determines it would not decrease aviation safety. Unfortunately, local and rural airports are having trouble with the time it takes the DOT to make these determinations. H.R. 6427 would allow small airports to be more agile in their project planning by changing the requirement for states to formally request permission from the Department of Transportation in order to use state highway specifications. By allowing states to simply notify DOT of their intention to use the state highway specifications rather than formally request permission, critical airfield pavement construction projects will no longer be subject to lengthy and bureaucratic delays. For oversight, the bill maintains the requirement that the DOT make a determination on whether the use of such state highway standards would negatively affect aviation safety. If more time is needed to conduct that safety review, the DOT may take successive 6-month extensions so long as the DOT notifies the airport and provides such airport with justification. This deadline and extension process will help increase transparency and efficiency for airport applicants, who will now be more regularly updated and ensure accountability by requiring justification come from the Department of Transportation. I support this legislation and urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's my honor to yield 5 minutes to the author of this legislation, the gentleman from Alaska, Mr. Begich.
The gentleman from Alaska is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 6427, the Airport Regulatory Relief Act of 2025, a bill I introduced to cut unnecessary federal red tape and deliver real cost savings to America's small rural airports, especially those across my home state of Alaska. For Alaska, maintaining our small airports is essential to keeping people, goods, and services moving, ensuring that supplies can reach even the most remote communities, and preserving access to life-saving medical care, reliable mail service, and economic opportunity. For years, the FAA has required even our smallest non-primary airports, those serving aircraft under 60,000 pounds gross weight, to follow the same costly one-size-fits-all federal pavement standards written for the nation's largest international hubs. These rigid mandates and bureaucratic approval processes drive up construction costs, create lengthy delays, and stall critical runway repairs. H.R. 6427 fixes exactly that problem. It allows states to use their own proven highway construction standards for airfield pavement projects at these non-primary airports. The process is simple and safe. The state simply notifies the Secretary of its intent, and the FAA must determine that the specifications will not negatively affect safety in any way. No new federal spending, no lowering of standards, just common sense, flexibility that gets work done faster and cheaper for the airports that need it most. This legislation has strong bipartisan support because it helps rural airports in every corner of the country without ever compromising the safety of the traveling public. Madam Speaker, in Alaska, our airports are lifelines. Passing H.R. 6427 will empower states and local communities to maintain those lifelines more efficiently and affordably. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this common sense measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves.
Reserves.
Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our local and rural airports are the backbone of general aviation in the United States, and they need Congress's help to remain cost competitive. This is a common sense piece of legislation that removes the federal government. This is not a situation where the federal government knows what's best. Many states have been doing this much longer than the federal government. My state of Alabama is not often thought of one in the lens of aviation history, but the Wright brothers, who we've spoken about today at length, who were from Ohio and flew in North Carolina when it came time to open their first civilian flight school. Little known fact is they opened that in Montgomery County, Alabama, which I now have the privilege of representing. They did that in 1910. The FAA wasn't founded until 1958. So the state of Alabama has been dealing with how to land aircraft on small airfields for at least nearly 50 years before the federal government was. So they know how to get the job done, and this bill allows them to do just that. That is why I support H.R. 6427 and urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, non-primary airports play a vital role in connecting rural and underserved communities like mine to essential services, sustaining local jobs, and enabling emergency response capabilities. Cutting red tape helps reduce project delays, lower construction costs, and give communities faster access to modern, safe airfield infrastructure, allowing limited federal dollars to stretch further and deliver greater value to passengers and local economies. This common sense measure reduces the burden on smaller airports seeking to use state highway pavement standards for airfield construction projects. Madam Speaker, I was honored to co-sponsor this legislation, and I urge support of this bill and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6427 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6460.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 472, H.R. 6460, a bill to amend Title 49 United States Code to clarify exceptions for limited recreational operations of unmanned aircraft and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Figures, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 6460.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to start by thanking my colleague, Representative Mann, for his initiative and leadership on this issue. General aviation, including recreational drone operations, are the lifeblood of the American aviation ecosystem. As such, it's of the utmost importance that we protect their access to the sky. Section 928 of the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 established a novel process by which community-based organizations could seek administrative approval from the FAA to conduct recreational unmanned aircraft systems operations in controlled airspace from a fixed site. If approved, the community-based organization would then work with the appropriate air traffic control facility to establish mutually agreed upon operating procedures. Unfortunately, when it came to implementing the law, the FAA's interpretation was at odds with congressional intent, and that resulted in recreational UAS clubs being unable to legally fly in certain sectors of Class E airspace. H.R. 6460, the Recreational Drone Empowerment Act, represents a common sense solution to ensure community-based organizations can seek authorization from the FAA to operate legally in all types of Class E airspace as Congress intended. Madam Speaker, I urge support of this legislation and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 6460, bipartisan legislation introduced by Representative Mann and Representative Sharice Davids from Kansas. The FAA reports there are more than 370,000 registered recreational drones in the U.S. However, the FAA's new interpretation of language in the reauthorization of 2018 and 2024 has now restricted these authorized recreational drone users to only Class E2 airspace designated for airports. This restriction was not the intent of Congress and leaves many lawful drone users unable to frequent the spaces that they are used to flying in, and doing so safely. Without change, there will likely be significant confusion amongst recreational hobbyists, who are simply trying to do what they have always been allowed to do. The bipartisan H.R. 6460 makes a technical correction to the current statute, authorizing the FAA through its existing approval process to permit eligible recreational drone flights in certain E-class controlled airspace. To clarify, this bill would not automatically allow for recreational drone flights near airports or higher altitude operations in uncontrolled airspace. Recreational drone operators would still be required to comply with the FAA's safety requirements and to go through the agency's approval process. This bill will help reduce some confusion for recreational drone operators to ensure safety and clarifies the FAA's authorization process for these drone flights. I support this legislation and urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's my honor to yield 5 minutes to the author of this legislation, the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Mann.
Gentleman from Kansas is recognized for 5 minutes.
I want to thank you, my friend from Ohio, for yielding me the time. Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of my bill, H.R. 6460, the Recreational Drone Empowerment Act, which clarifies the ability of the FAA to authorize model aircraft operations in Class E airspace. Everyone gets their start somewhere. For many folks, a lifelong passion for flight is ignited the first time they get the experience of what model aeronautics has to offer. For some, that passion leads them to ultimately pursue long and successful careers in the aviation workforce. We must do whatever we can to foster a robust recreational operational environment where individuals of all ages can experience all that aviation has to offer. In 2018, Congress classified model aircraft as recreational UAS. That legislation spelled out what classes of airspace and under what conditions recreational UAS could fly. For 7 years, and on behalf of its 2,400 member clubs, of which 30 reside in the great state of Kansas, the Academy of Model Aeronautics has been collaborating with the FAA to attract the next generation of aviation professionals. Unfortunately, due to a misinterpretation of a provision of the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024, many recreational clubs across the country found they were no longer able to legally fly in some sectors of Class E airspace. The Recreational Drone Empowerment Act allows model aircraft clubs to request permission from the FAA to operate in Class E2, E3, E4, and E5 airspace, as it does for all other classifications of airspace. This legislation does not require the FAA to grant such a request. It merely grants them the legal authority to approve such requests. I would like to thank Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Larson, and the members of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee for their support of my legislation that will give regulatory certainty to an important part of the aviation community and continues to encourage the next generation of aviators. Thank you. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Recreational drone use is a rapidly growing pastime here in America, and we must put in place sufficient guardrails for safety. That's why I support H.R. 6460 and urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, to reiterate, freedom of the skies is an inherently American ideal. This legislation does not require the FAA to approve every community-based organization request. Rather, it provides the FAA with the statutory authority to consider all applications and approve or deny at the agency's discretion. The Recreational Drone Empowerment Act represents a solution oriented to fix, ensure, and protect America's ability to access the airspace. Once again, I'd like to thank Representative Mann from Kansas for his work on this issue. Madam Speaker, I urge support of this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6460? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2247 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 474, H.R. 2247, a bill to amend Title 49 United States Code to authorize the use of physical or digital copies of certain certificates for certain Federal Aviation Administration inspections and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Figures, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 2247.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, H.R. 2247, the Airman Certificate Accessibility Act, is common sense legislation that would bring the Federal Aviation Administration into the digital age. In today's digital age, it's past time for the FAA to join the 21st century and allow digital options for airman certificates. I'm supportive of any initiative that safely lowers barriers and ultimately allows more Americans to exercise their freedom to fly. Allowing pilots the option to carry digital copies of their certifications in lieu of paper copies accomplishes that. The FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 directed the agency to holistically review and digitize processes. The Airman Certificate Accessibility Act builds upon those efforts and represents an incremental step towards digitization that benefits all users. Madam Speaker, I urge support of this legislation and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 2247, the Pilot Certificate Accessibility Act as amended. Current law requires airmen to carry physical versions of their pilot license, and in case a representative of the FAA ever needs to verify the airman status. This is despite other important paper documents pilots are required to carry, such as their flight bags or flight books, now being allowed to be carried in a digitized form. The option for airmen to now carry their certificate in a readily accessible digital format is a priority for the aviation community, and we have heard them on this issue. H.R. 2247, as amended, combines the necessary safeguards to provide the option for a digital airman certificate that is issued by the FAA, so long as that certificate can be authenticated and verified by an inspector. This digital certificate may be uploaded to a device on the airman's person, or, if in the presence of a stable internet connection, be stored and accessed through the cloud. The bill would direct the FAA into rulemaking to ensure these digital certificates are just as secure as their physical originals and establish guidelines for their authentication and verification. By allowing airmen to use a digital certificate in this way, we will continue our efforts to safely and securely modernize the FAA. I support this legislation, and I thank my colleague from Tennessee, Representative Burchett, for his leadership here, and I urge my colleagues to support this as well. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's my honor to yield 5 minutes to the author of this legislation, the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Dadgummit, if I need 5 minutes, pull me off on this one, okay? First and foremost, I express my deepest sympathies to those good folks who lost their lives at LaGuardia Airport in New York, and I hope we all remember them and their families in our prayers. I rise today in support of H.R. 2247, the Airman Certificate Accessibility Act. And I guess it should be air people, technically. My mama flew an airplane during the Second World War, so I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. But the pilots are still required to carry paper copies of their original medical certificates and licenses. The FAA says this requirement exists mainly because of concerns about forgery, but the FAA already keeps secure electronic records of these certificates. And the Airman Certificate Accessibility Act will allow pilots to present digital certificates issued by the FAA administrator during inspections. You know, dadgummit, Madam Speaker, it's ridiculous that Congress has to digitize pilot documentation because unelected bureaucrats decided to invent some unnecessary rules. To me, we shouldn't have to be on the floor of the Congress to do that, but this bill would allow airmen to continue to present physical certificates they choose, providing flexibility while ensuring security and compliance. The aviation sector remains burdened by outdated practice in an era of rapid technological advances, and this common sense legislation helps modernize the industry, enhances convenience for airmen, and align FAA procedures with 21st century standards. And I urge my colleagues to support this important piece of legislation. And I wanted to thank Noah Hooten in my office who did all the heavy lifting on that. I appreciate the support from across the aisle. Thank y'all.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman reserves.
Yes.
Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I agree with my colleague from Tennessee. This should not take an act of Congress to do. But nevertheless, we are here and we have to do it. And so I appreciate his work on this issue and making sure that we can balance a long asked for convenience to our pilots with the necessary safeguards. That's why I support H.R. 2247 as amended and urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Recognized.
Madam Speaker, in closing, I want to thank Representative Burchett again for his leadership in introducing this common sense legislation. For decades, pilots have been required to carry physical copies of their certificates, even as aviation has entered the digital age. Allowing pilots the option to carry digital certificates is a simple, safe, and practical step that reduces unnecessary barriers and makes it easier to exercise the freedom to fly. This legislation represents a reasonable incremental move toward fully digitized systems that benefit all users. Madam Speaker, I urge support of this bill and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2247 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For purpose, the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3410 as amended.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 473, H.R. 3410, a bill to allow for the operation of civil supersonic flight in the national airspace system under certain conditions and for the purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Figures, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 3410.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, H.R. 3410, the Supersonic Aviation Modernization Act, or the SAM Act, lays the preliminary framework for a return to civil supersonic aircraft operations in the United States. The SAM Act directs the Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration to issue or revise current regulations that are outdated and, in some cases, to create an artificial speed limit that hampers American innovation. Despite these restrictions, engine technology has continued to mature and successfully demonstrate that it's feasible to conduct supersonic operations in the national airspace system without generating a sonic boom that reaches the ground. Furthermore, the SAM Act builds on key work done in the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 to usher in a new age of American innovation in the skies. President Trump's executive order entitled Leading the World in Supersonic Flight documented the importance of American leadership in this re-emerging sector of aviation. To that end, the time is now. Let's come together and support American business and innovation. Madam Speaker, I urge support for this legislation and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I rise in support of H.R. 3410, the Supersonic Aviation Modernization Act as amended, bipartisan legislation introduced by Representative Nels and Representative Davids. One of the priorities of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, which I have the privilege of sitting on with my colleague from Ohio, Representative Taylor, one of our priorities is to look for new ways to help our constituents have a better flying experience, and supersonic flight is poised to be another paradigm shift in the aviation industry, especially if it can be done in ways that maintain safety and limit noise and sonic booms. However, currently, supersonic aircraft are prohibited from operating in the U.S. without a special authorization from the FAA. H.R. 3410, as amended, is the first step to eventually allowing Americans to safely travel across the country at almost half the time it takes now, providing more time for being productive or spending time with family and not on a plane. The bill would require FAA to revise current regulations to ensure supersonic aircraft could fly in the U.S. as long as these operations do not create a supersonic boom that reaches the ground. It would also help ensure these aircraft would not create noise levels any higher than traditional aircraft that are currently in operation. This bipartisan bill also calls for future updates to the standard by the FAA to ensure supersonic aircraft become even quieter in the future. Furthermore, the bill ensures that these noise standards are periodically reviewed and further updated to reflect the latest advances in aircraft technology. While Congress and the FAA should continue working to make supersonic flights more sustainable, I am greatly encouraged that the industry stakeholders are designing their supersonic aircraft to fly completely on sustainable aviation fuel. The potential benefits to consumers are promising. Less time on the aircraft and more time building that new business or spending time with friends and family. I'd like to thank the Aviation Subcommittee Chairman Nels and Representative Davids from Kansas for their leadership on this legislation. I support this legislation and urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have no more speakers, and I'm prepared to close. I'll reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you. We should have been here a long time ago. In terms of being able to build on the supersonic technology that has been out for years. It's been over 2 decades now since the supersonic aircraft has been used in a commercial context, and we have the technological advances to be able to do so and do so safely and efficiently. This legislation is common sense. It pushes back or guards against the things that were most that had the most worries in previous iterations of this type of technology, particularly sonic booms reaching the ground. And noise levels. And so the flying public deserves a better flying experience, and this bill is a step in the right direction of being able to provide that. That's why I support it, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In closing, I'd like to thank Aviation Subcommittee Chairman Representative Nels for his leadership on this issue. A return of civil supersonic operations within the national airspace system will reimagine how Americans travel and commute, opening new possibilities for people and commerce to traverse this great nation. Think of the possibilities, D.C. to Los Angeles in just 2 hours. While this may seem far-fetched, it's closer to reality than many would believe. In fact, several U.S. airlines already have pre-orders of supersonic jets. The United States in a prime position to be the global leader in civil supersonic technologies. Madam Speaker, I urge support of this bill and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3410? Those in favor, as amended, those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6422 as amended.
The clerk will report the title.
Union Calendar Number 485, H.R. 6422, a bill to amend the Federal Water Pollution Control Act to reauthorize certain EPA geographic programs and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, and the gentleman from Alabama will each control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material into the record on H.R. 6422 as amended.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. H.R. 6422 as amended reauthorizes several longstanding EPA programs through fiscal year 2031, including the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, the Long Island Sound Program, the Columbia River Basin Restoration Program, and National Estuary Program, and the Beach Act Program, among others. It also includes strong oversight provisions requiring the GAO to study the management, effectiveness, and ethical practices of these and additional EPA geographic programs and report back to Congress. Additionally, the programs included in H.R. 6422 have bipartisan support. This legislation includes the Estuaries Act, which would reauthorize the National Estuary Program that helps local communities protect important estuaries and improve water quality, and the Beach Act, which would reauthorize a program that helps local communities keep Americans recreating in coastal waters safe from diseases and pollution. I'm proud to say these bills were previously reported out of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee with strong bipartisan support, and that H.R. 6422 was approved by voice vote. Madam Speaker, it is our constituents on the ground who know what is best for their communities, and reauthorizing these programs will continue to empower them to address water quality and pollution issues where they live, yielding better results for all Americans. I urge support of H.R. 6422 and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume. I rise in support of H.R. 6422, the American Water Stewardship Act as amended. This bipartisan bill that combines several standalone bills that all have broad support. I am proud to have sponsored the Estuaries Act, which reauthorizes the National Estuary Program and is included in Section 6 of this bill. The National Estuaries Program is an important resource supporting locally led efforts to restore and protect the environmental health of estuaries of national significance, one of which is in my district, in my hometown, the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program. H.R. 6422, as amended, reauthorizes several other EPA programs that have strong bipartisan support due to their proven success. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative covers a wide geographic area and works to protect and restore the country's largest source of fresh water. Other programs include the Columbia River Basin Program, as well as the Beach Act, which Representative Pallone has championed for years. I would like to again recognize my Democratic committee colleagues, Representatives McDonald, Rivet, Skolton, Sykes, Gillen, Hoyle, Brownlee, Pappas, Huffman, Moulton, Poe, and Norton, it's a lot of us, for their leadership on this comprehensive package, and also my Republican colleagues as well. Reauthorizing each of these EPA programs will allow them the federal support they need to continue the comprehensive, complex work they do locally to restore and protect local aquatic ecosystems. The health of our water resources supports the health of our communities by providing flood protection, storing clean water, and supporting our water-based economies. I support the American Water Stewardship Act as amended and urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm honored to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Stauber.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My legislation, the American Water Stewardship Act, is a comprehensive package that brings together 6 standalone bills to reauthorize and strengthen key EPA water quality and ecosystem restoration programs. The package includes the Beach Act, introduced by Representatives David Joyce, Frank Pallone, David Rouser, and Amelia Sykes, which supports coastal water monitoring and helps local communities protect public health. It also reauthorizes the National Estuary Program, championed by Representatives Figures and Mast, that protects and restores the water quality of estuaries of national significance. The package also reauthorizes several geographic programs with strong track records, including the Long Island Sound Program, led by Representative Lolota, and the Columbia River Basin Restoration Program, led by Representative Hoyle. Most important to me, however, is that this bill reauthorizes the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative has long been championed by Representative David Joyce of Ohio, as well as many other members of the Great Lakes region. I have always appreciated working with such a strong bipartisan group of members to ensure this important program is recognized, reauthorized, and well-funded. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, or the GLRI, represents the largest federal investment in the Great Lakes, which are vitally important to my home state of Minnesota. The GLRI is the largest and arguably the most successful EPA geographic program. Its work focuses on cleaning up the Great Lakes, reducing pollution, addressing invasive species, and restoring critical habitat for local species. To date, more than 8,000 projects have been completed through the GLRI, generating over $3 in economic activity for every $1 in federal investment. This is an incredible rate of return for a federal program, and it is just one of the reasons why I have strongly advocated for the GLRI during my time here in Congress. I would be remiss if I did not extend my gratitude to Congressman David Joyce and all the other Great Lakes champions for their work on this effort. I am happy we have found a legislative vehicle to move this important program forward. At its core, this package reflects a common-sense approach to water stewardship, supporting community-led efforts, encouraging collaboration, and demonstrating that responsible environmental protection go hand in hand with economic growth and fiscal responsibility. I urge my colleagues to support this package, and I yield back.
Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To date, the National Estuary Program covers 28 unique coastal habitats nationwide, and with passage of this would add another one. The Columbia River Basin is one of our largest watersheds. The Great Lakes are the largest system of fresh surface water in the world. The Long Island Sound provides benefits to millions of residents in New York and Connecticut and habitat to more than 1,200 invertebrates, 170 species of fish, and dozens of species of migratory birds. These water bodies are worth protecting, and there is major economic and recreational and human health benefits to restoring them all. Further, as the weather warms up, I know we are all looking forward to visiting our favorite beaches and coastal areas, which means we need to know that our coastal waters are safe from contaminants. This bill pulls together reauthorizations for 5 critical programs, all of which are broadly supported by members on both sides of the aisle. The bill provides these programs with 5 additional years of flat funding and also ensures the GAO evaluates the continued success of each of EPA's geographic programs. The American Water Stewardship Act is just that, thoughtful stewardship of our most critical water resources, and I support this bill as amended and urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. H.R. 6422, the American Water Stewardship Act, is an important bipartisan bill that will empower local communities continue to take the lead on improving water quality in coastal areas, as well as to ensure strong oversight of these EPA programs by Congress. I want to thank Mr. Stauber and Ms. McDonald-Rivet for their leadership on the T&I committee, as well as Representatives Joyce, Larson, Figures, Rouser, Sykes, Huffman, Bonamici, Lalota, Pallone, Ezell, Schulten, Mast, and Herodopoulos and Hoyle for their leadership on specific initiatives contained within H.R. 6422. Madam Speaker, I urge support for this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6422 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative,
Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I didn't mean the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.